Good morning, sunshines. You survived it. The last lecture. Yay! All right, today we're going to talk about Angels in America a little bit. For those of you who are assigned Angels in America as your presentation for the class, put together your materials and email them to me, and I'll disseminate them to the rest of the class, as we have been all semester. Angels in America is a very complex masterpiece, is what I'm going to call it. It is about many different things. It's about religion, especially Judaism and Mormonism. It is about homosexuality. It's about disease, AIDS specifically, also mental illness, and how to deal with people who are in both of those conditions. It is frank. It is gruesome. It is hysterical at times. There are ghosts that appear from people's pasts. There are angels that appear from nowhere. It is very surreal at times, and it's a lot of fun. One of the things that I've done, I've included for the next class period, again, this is the last lecture, but we have one more class meeting where we're going to, I'm sending you the links to Acts 1, Acts 2, and Acts 3 of Angels in America. And for the next class period, I need you to watch those 3 links because, again, the play can be very dense on the page. So, again, it gives you a little help in understanding the play specifically. Again, one of the things about Tony Kushner, who's a playwright, he's born in 1956. I would say of the next generation of playwrights, he's the one I'm most sure is going to have a firm place in the American psyche. He's written 35 plays to date. He won a Pulitzer Prize for Angels in America. He's also written a musical that he won a Tony Award for called Caroline or Change. Now again, he just wrote the book to the musical, he didn't write the music. He's also written 5 movies. 2 of them have been nominated for an Oscar. Both of them were with Steven Spielberg, Munich, and also Lincoln. And Lincoln, the screenplay for Lincoln won him an Oscar for best writer, for best screenplay that year. So Tony Kushner has certainly made a name for himself in the industry. To help us understand some of the issues that are in Angels in America, I'm going to show you a scene. One of the things that Angels in America, it has many characters. One of the great things about it is the characters are all complete. They all have a background. They all have different approaches to the world. They're very interesting characters. They're certainly not bland and passé. They certainly have issues and attitudes. But one of the characters in the play is based on an actual, real, living person. His name is Roy Cohn. We've talked about the House on Un-American Activities Committee several times in this class before. Roy Cohn was one of the lawyers who worked with McCarthy in order to out the communists. And there was this female that he accused of spying, and he made sure that she received the electric chair. And one of the ghosts in the play that haunts one of the characters in the play is this ghost coming back to haunt Roy Cohn. Now, a little bit about Roy Cohn. He was a fiendish lawyer, very Republican, very right-wing politician. Again, he was in the Reagan White House during the time this play was released in '89, but it was about the lack of activity that the government had in pursuing the AIDS crisis because it was seen as a gay disease. And so when it first happened in the mid-'80s, the only people who contracted AIDS were homosexuals and Haitians for some reason. And so it was viewed as a disease that it was God's wrath to man. And so there were several years that passed where nothing was done to combat the disease, and it spread throughout America, and especially in Africa, unabated. And one of the people who pursued this policy was a man named Roy Cohn, who outwardly was heterosexual, but truth be known, he was homosexual and eventually died from the disease in the late 80s. So again, it's about the hypocrisy that you're going to find in government and all that sort of thing. Anyway, I'm going to show you a scene where his doctor is trying to explain to Roy Cohn that he has AIDS, And the nice thing about it is it also describes a little bit about what AIDS actually is. So enjoy this little scene.
Nobody knows what causes it. And nobody knows how to cure it. The best theory is that we blame a retrovirus, the human immunodeficiency virus. Its presence is made known to us by the useless antibodies which appear in reaction to its entrance into the bloodstream through a cut or an orifice. The antibodies are powerless to protect the body against it. Why? We don't know. The body's immune system ceases to function. Sometimes the body even attacks itself. At any rate, it's left open to a whole horror house of infections from microbes which it usually defends against. Like Kaposi's sarcomas, these lesions, or your throat problem, or the glands. We think it may also be able to slip past the blood-brain barrier into the brain, which is, of course, very bad news. And it's fatal in we don't know what % of people with suppressed immune responses.
This is very interesting, Mr. Wizard, but why the fuck are you telling me this?
Well, I have just removed one of 3 lesions, which biopsy results will probably tell us is a Kaposi's sarcoma lesion. And you have a pronounced swelling of glands in your neck, groin, and armpits. Lymphadenopathy is another sign. And you have oral candidiasis. And maybe a little more fungus under the fingernails of 2 digits on your right hand. So that's why...
This disease.
Syndrome.
Whatever. It afflicts mostly homosexuals and drug addicts.
Mostly. Hemophiliacs are also at risk.
Homosexuals and drug addicts. So why are you implying that I... What are you implying, Henry? I'm not a drug addict.
Oh, come on, Roy.
What? Come on, Roy, what? Do you think I'm a junkie, Henry? Do you see tracks?
This is absurd.
Say it.
Say what?
Say Roy Cohn, URA.
Roy, I don't...
URA, go on. Not Roy Cohn. You are a drug fiend. Roy Marcus Cohn. URA. Go on, Henry. It starts with an H.
I'm not
with
gonna...
an H, Henry, and it isn't hemophiliac. Come on.
What are you doing, Roy?
No, say it. I mean it. Say, Roy Cohn, you are a homosexual. And I will proceed systematically to destroy your reputation and your practice and your career in New York State, Henry. Which you know I can do.
Roy, you have been seeing me since 1958. Apart from the facelifts, I've treated you for everything, from syphilis...
From a whore in Dallas.
From syphilis to venereal warts in your rectum. Which you may have gotten from a whore in Dallas, but it wasn't a female whore.
So say it.
Roy Cohn, you are... You have had sex with men many, many times, Roy. And one of them, or any number of them, has made you very sick. You have AIDS.
Your problem, Henry, is that you are hung up on words, on labels, that you believe they mean what they seem to mean. AIDS, homosexual, gay, lesbian. You think these are names that tell you who someone sleeps with. But they don't tell you that.
No?
No. Like all labels, they tell you one thing, and one thing only. Where does an individual so identified fit in the food chain, in the pecking order? Not ideology or sexual taste, but something much simpler. Clout. Not who I fuck or who fucks me, but who will pick up the phone when I call. Who owes me favors. This is what a label refers to. Now, to someone who does not understand this, homosexual is what I am because I have sex with men. But really, this is wrong. Homosexuals are not men who sleep with other men. Homosexuals are men who, in 15 years of trying, cannot pass a pissant anti-discrimination bill through city council. Homosexuals are men who know nobody and who nobody knows, who have zero clout. Does this sound like me, Henry?
No.
No, I have clout. A lot. I can pick up this phone, punch 15 numbers, and you know who will be on the other end in under 5 minutes, Henry?
The president.
Even better, Henry. His wife.
Oh, I'm impressed.
I don't want you to be impressed. I want you to understand. This is not sophistry, and this is not hypocrisy. This is reality. I have sex with men, but unlike nearly every other man of whom this is true, I bring the guy I'm screwing to the White House, and President Reagan smiles at us and shakes his hand, because what I am is defined entirely by who I am. Roy Cohn is not a homosexual. Roy Cohn is a heterosexual man, Henry, who fucks around with guys.
Okay, Roy.
And what is my diagnosis, Henry?
You have AIDS, Roy.
No, Henry, no. AIDS is what homosexuals have. I have liver cancer.
Well, whatever the fuck you have, Roy, it's very serious, and I haven't got a damn thing for you. The NIH in Bethesda has a new drug called AZT with a 2-year waiting list that not even I can get you onto. So get on the phone, Roy, and dial the 15 numbers. And tell the First Lady that you need in on an experimental treatment for liver cancer. Because you can call it any damn thing you want, Roy. But what it boils down to is very bad news.
Again, very frank, very open, very straightforward, not necessarily something you've ever seen on stage before. Again, you're going to see all the elements of theater coming together in Angels in America. And again, I hope you will leave it for the rest of you to watch the entire show for next class period. And again, if you have any questions or problems or concerns, please, by all means, feel free to email me and let me know. One of the other great innovations in American theater in the 20th century was the audience-to-actor relationship. Not only were playwrights encouraged to pursue different ways of presenting the play, directors having different tools at their command, expressionism, impressionism, all those sort of things, it's realism, but the playwrights started playing with the audience-to-actor configuration. Going back as far as the 17th century, from the time of the French really, the proscenium stage was the dominant style. Most theaters today are still going to be proscenium. Proscenium stage, the proscenium arch, is the architectural division between the audience and the actor. In other words, it's the picture frame. And you can see that there's a stage beyond, and the audience is on this side and the actors are on that side, and never do they cross. There's a safety zone there, a free zone, Often talked about as the fourth wall in straight comedy, straight plays where there's just a three-wall set on stage, and you just sort of take away the fourth wall, and the audience is sort of looking in on the environment that way. But that is the standard up until the 20th century. One of the things that happens in the 20th century is that playwrights, as well as directors, start expanding and changing and altering the way the audience sees the play. One of the major innovations was a thrust stage. Now, I say innovation, but really that's the way the Greeks did it. A thrust stage is a stage that goes out into the audience. There's a little picture there where you can see that the stage, you can see that 2/3 of the audience sees the other audience as their scenery, as their background. There's still room for scenery behind. You see that little purple curtain back there. There's still room to put scenery back there, but scenery has become far less important, and the focus has become much more on the actor, to eventually evolve into theater in the round arena theater, where there is no wall at all. The set has disappeared almost totally, and you see there's a space for the actor to be in the center, and audience is surrounded on all sides. And it's difficult to put doors, windows, and things up, because if you put a door or window up, you're going to block some audience's view. So things become very impressionistic. Reality has now gone out the window as far as scene design is concerned, and now you're into a new innovative style of theater. The fourth style, I'm just going to call it multi-form space. Our theater is a black box, for instance. We can do proscenium, we do often. We can also do thrust, and we can do it in the round. True multi-form space, though, is something that's much more adventurous. The style I've shown here is stadium seating, where you have audiences on two sides. You could also have theater stuck in the corner. You could have theater, have the audience in the middle and theater happening around people. That's a black box theater. You can be changed. It's a multi-form space. But again, those type of theaters start becoming the more common type of theater to be built because stage productions rely less and less on the scenery to tell the story, and more on the actor to explain the story and what's going on. Cool. All right. We're going to end with 5 or 6 people here who I think are the next coming wave. Again, as I was telling Cody on the way down, these people change more often than not in the presentations of this class, simply because one person will come and win a Pulitzer, and so they take control of that sort of stuff. A couple of these people have been around for a few years. Again, I've still got nobody that was born after 1980, so again, there are some young playwrights out there that I just don't have time in this class to go through everybody. So I picked these 6 people as the next generation of people. The first, she certainly she won a Pulitzer Prize for a play called How I Learned to Drive. Not that any of you need any extra credit, but the last play that is in your text is How I Learned to Drive, and you could read it for extra credit and write me a little report on it. One of the things about Paula Vogel, she was born in 1951, still alive today. Her plays tend to deal with hypersexual situations. The characters in her plays almost always have some sort of sexual problem. She herself was a lesbian, and she was the first outed lesbian to win a Pulitzer Prize with How I Learned to Drive. In the play, there are several people who have nicknames. For instance, Little Bit is called Little Bit because when she was little, her breasts were little bitty sprouts. And so the characters have nicknames based upon their sexual energy, I guess is the best way to put it. There's a father who was very sexually active. There's incest between an uncle and a daughter. It's not a fraternity, it's an uncle who married into the family. I don't know if that makes it any better, but incest is discussed. And that's what happens in a lot of Paula Vogel plays. She borders on the pornographic. She certainly questions and pushes the line of the pornographic in her plays, which for the low lady is funny, because here she is, a 65-year-old lady who's writing these type of plays. Paula Vogel did teach at Brown. She is retired from teaching now. But while she was teaching, one of her students, a man named Nilo Cruz, who is from Cuba, and Nilo Cruz happened to win a Pulitzer Prize as well for a play called Anna in the Tropics. I'll show you a little brief video on Anna in the Tropics.
I just arrived from the What are you planning on reading to us?
First, Tolstoy, Anna Karenina.
Anna Karenina! I like the title already. Is it romantic?
Yes, quite romantic.
Ah, yes. We can't forget our lector, who brought us the world of Anna Karenina.
Again, that was sort of a promotional campaign. And in the Tropics is really about this cigar shop where the employers are mistreating the employees, and there's eventually the employees rise up and try and start a union and all this sort of stuff, get better conditions. One of the things that happens, they bring in somebody to read a book to them instead of having just the mind-numbing stuff and just making the cigars for the shop. You have somebody come in and actually read Anna Karenina to them and read literature to them. So there are a lot of phases during the course of the play, but basically it's a very political play about work and the value of work and the responsibility that the owner has to the employees and vice versa. But they become the only pair of student and teacher to both have ever won a Pulitzer Prize. So I think that's a kind of an interesting thing. For years, I thought Susan Laurie Parks, who was born in 1964, was going to be the rage. And she started off on fire. She won a Pulitzer Prize for a play called Topdog, Underdog. Topdog, Underdog has two characters in the play. They're both black men, they're brothers. One is a light-skinned African-American, and one is a dark-skinned African-American. And again, I'm not African-American, but I have heard rumor that there is some conflict between those two aspects of African-American life. And Lincoln is a light-skinned African-American, and in his life he pretends to be Lincoln in this little sideshow thing where people shoot pop guns at him. And Booth is his brother, who is a dark-skinned African-American, who is trying to learn the three-card Monte as his tool of trade. And as you can guess by their names, at the end of the play, there is a little fight between the brothers that one brother may wind up winning. We'll let you guess based on history as to who the winner of that fight might be. In the Blood is another one of her. She was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize for In the Blood. The one that's in your text is a play called The American Play. It was actually written before either one of those plays, but in the American play you also have people pretending to be Abraham Lincoln. I don't know what it is with Suzanne Laurie Parks' fascination with Abraham Lincoln, but of course he freed the slaves. But there is a African-American playwright named Lynn Nottage who has sort of taken up the mantle from Suzanne Laurie Parks. Suzanne Laurie Parks sort of started resting on her laurels. Don't let her hear that from me. But she started going around speaking, giving lectures, making $30,000 to $40,000 a lecture, staying at universities for a semester and teaching, that sort of stuff, and has stopped writing plays. Hasn't produced. She only wrote up to date 19 plays. But Lynn Nottage was born in 1964 as well, the same year. She teaches at Columbia University, Lynn Nottage does. To date, she has written 11 plays and won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. The Pulitzer Prize was one is for a play called Sweat. Sweat takes place in a bar in the Northeast, and there's a factory in the town, and you find out at the beginning of the play that the factory is sending some jobs to Mexico, and so you have some members of the bar who are very angry at the company because they've lost their job, but then some people defend the company. And of course, at the beginning of the second act, the company is totally sending everybody down to Mexico, and so the entire village or town is going under because of the loss of the factory jobs. So that's Sweat. Her other Pulitzer Prize was for a play called Ruined. Ruined, again, happens in a bar, but it happens in a bar in Africa. And you have these ladies who run the bar, but there are these militants who come in and enslave them basically and take over the running of the bar. I'll show you a little video from Ruined, just to give you a sense of the type of plays that Lynn Nottage writes. So enjoy this little sequence.
I've done many things for you over the years, and I don't ask for a lot in return.
Does that make me a thief, or merely more clever than you?
Hey, don't look so hard at a man like that.
We can do better.
You can see it's very visceral, very raw. There's a rape scene that's pretty graphic in the course of the play. One of her nicer plays is a play called Intimate Apparel, where you have this young African American in the early part of the 20th century who sews corsets and ladies' undergarments for people in society. And she is rather homely herself, according to the play. But eventually marries a man who helped build the Panama Canal, who's very gruff. But it's a interesting mixture about how a person survives in a world that is so harsh, but survives with such beauty and elegance. It's one of my favorite plays, recent plays. And I think Lynn Nottage has certainly made her claim, sacred claim as being one of the major playwrights that's evolving in America. One of the strangest playwrights in the modern sense is a woman named Sarah Rule. Sarah Rule has to date written 15 plays. She was born in 1974. She's a little younger than the other ladies we've been talking about. Sarah Rule's plays are extremely funny. They're extremely raucous. She was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize for a play called The Clean House, where you have this woman who's a doctor who just wants everything very clean, and unfortunately for her, she's hired a housemaid who's a South American woman who hates cleaning the house. I have no idea why she's got a house cleaner, but that's what she does. Anyway, the house cleaner wants to be a comedian. And so she goes around telling jokes all the time. She's trying to tell jokes. Jokes pretty bad. I would say her best play is called In the Next Room. The subtitle is The Vibrator Play. There's a doctor who is experimenting, again, this happens in the latter half of the 19th century, and he's experimenting with women's orgasms and trying to figure out how and why and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, here's a little video of the opening night of the show. It opened in 2009. Enjoy this little sequence here.
Hello, I'm Richard Ridge for Broadway Beat. We're at the opening night celebration for the latest from Lincoln Center Theater. It's Sarah Rule's In the Next Room, or The Vibrator Play, playing at the Lyceum Theater. It's directed by Les Waters and stars Tony Award winners Michael Cerveris and Laura Benanti.
Excuse me. What is it?
What is that sound? What are you doing?
Electrical therapy, my dear. A very successful session.
I wish to see it.
You would not understand. Leave me my dry, boring science, and I will give you the rest of the world. Besides, you said yourself, my electricity bored
I
you.
insist on seeing your machine now.
Are you going to force me to lock my laboratory?
I am your wife.
And happily, you are my blooming young wife, without a hint of neuroses and in no need of my experiments and inventions.
Experiment on me!
Oh, I can assure you, you would not like it.
Experiment on me!
It would be unseemly for a man of science to experiment on his own wife. I would lose my credibility. Now, would you please have the decency to be quiet while Mrs. Daughtry is in the next room?
I've been a fan of Sarah Rule's writing for some time. I did a workshop a few years ago of another play of hers called Passion Play. And I've been looking forward to having an opportunity to really settle into a production with her. So there's that at the base level. And this particular play, I felt is so beautiful and kind of the most complete fulfillment of the kind of writing she's been doing to date. You know, it's sort of got every element of what she does so beautifully. The the humor and the structure and the craftsmanship, but also just, her very personal, idiosyncratic and hugely generous heart and soul that I think is so apparent in the writing. And, getting to play a character who goes on such a journey from being so closed off to being as open and unprotected as you can be. That's appealing journey to chart. And then to get to work with Laura and Maria and Chandler and Tom and everybody in the cast, many of whom I knew having seen them in things, and a couple of whom I had worked with before. Actually, I had never worked with anybody before other than a workshop here or there, or Laura and I did a concert or two, did songs at a benefit together. But so that's been especially exciting.
Wait, Elizabeth, before you leave, perhaps you can settle a question? Mrs. Daldry and I have had 2 experiences of the very same event. Have you ever had this sensation either? You feel shivers all over your body, and you feel like running, and your feet get very hot as though you're dancing on devil's coals.
Or you see unaccountable patterns of lights, of electricity under your eyelids, and your heart races, and your legs feel very weak as though you cannot walk.
And your face gets suddenly hot, like a strange sudden sunburn.
Or there are red splotches up one side of your entire body, a strange rash here.
Or the feeling of burning as though you'll get no relief, and your mouth is dry, and you lick your lips, and you find your face is making an ugly expression, so you cover your face with your hands.
And sometimes a great outpouring of liquid and the sheets are wet. Oh, but it's not an unpleasant sensation, but a little frightening. Is that a riddle?
What attracted me to the play was just its honesty, how deeply funny it was, and then how deeply moving it was. And what attracted me to the role was the challenge. She's not an easy person to play, to make into a full person. So as a person who always wants to grow and change and learn new things, I looked at it as a challenge, and it has been a challenge, but one that has been very rewarding. I've always felt very drawn to the Victorian era. I think I must have lived in a past life in the Victorian era. And I'm very, you know what it is? It's the innocence that attracts me. When things still were able to seem magical, I'm very drawn to that.
But it's a hysterical play. Again, it's I would say there are lessons that the modern audience can certainly take. Men certainly don't necessarily know all about women's bodies even today, and so it is uncomfortable at times, but it is hysterical, and that's the type of play that Sarah Rule writes. A very comedic playwright, as far as and far less serious in nature, but still important information to know about society and public and all that sort of stuff. One of my favorite playwrights, just because he's a friend of mine, is a man named Tracy Letts. I've actually played poker with Tracy Letts. He's from Chicago. He's an actor like Sam Shepard, as well as a playwright. He has been in 5 plays as an actor on Broadway. He's written 9 plays to date, and he won a Pulitzer Prize for a play called August Osage County. Tracy Letts was actually born in Oklahoma, raised in Oklahoma, and August Osage County is about this dysfunctional family from Oklahoma, and I think that there has a lot to do with sort of his personal history. Anyway, there was a movie made out of it a couple years ago. Here's the trailer for the movie, just so you get a sense of the play.
Life is very long. T.S. Eliot. Not the first person to say it. Certainly not the first person to think it. Absolutely goddamn right.
You ready for this?
No. No way.
Hey, Mom, I'm here.
Oh, Mom, you're so big. Look at your boobs. Last time I saw you, you looked like a little boy.
God damn your father for putting me through this.
Do you remember your Aunt Karen? Well, that must be this year's man.
Soon you'll be gone, never to return.
Don't start with that.
Father, you broke his heart when you moved away.
That is wildly unfair.
You were Beverly's favorite, you know that.
I'd prefer to think my parents loved their children equally.
I'm sure you prefer to think that Santa Claus brought you presents, too.
I missed Uncle Beth's funeral.
It doesn't mean anything compared to what you have in your heart.
Bill, where are you living now?
Beg your pardon?
You and Barb are separated, right? Or are you divorced already? Is there a younger woman involved?
You've said enough on this topic.
Yes.
Well, see, odds are against you there, babe.
That's pleasant.
In my day, families stayed together.
I'm a man on fire, walking through your street with one guitar and two dancing feet.
You supposed to be smoking?
Is anybody supposed to smoke?
What are you doing?
Do I smell what I think I smell?
Be a father. Help me.
Our kid is trying to deal with this madhouse you dragged her into.
This madhouse is my home.
Yeah, think about that statement for a second.
Marriage is hard.
That's one thing about Mom and Dad. You gotta tip your hat to anybody who could stay married that long.
Karen killed himself. Thank God we can't tell the future. We'd never get out of it.
Tracy is very down-to-earth playwright. His characters are very diverse. They're very witty. They're very they're all very much searching for the truth in life. He's got one of his other plays, a play called Bug, where these people, speaking of people in quarantine, these two people both are scared of bugs to the point where they eventually put tinfoil all around the inside of their house so they can make sure that there are no bugs that have entered their house. Anyway, it's about the insanity, and of course the bugs wind up being the human beings. So I'm sure you've seen reports that the world is cleansing itself now that people are not polluting it nearly as much. So that's the type of plays that Tracy lets one. And I beat him at poker, so I always going to bring that up. Anyway, he was born in 1965. He's a great guy. So what does that bring us? Theater, obviously. One of the things about theater, it can be a shortcut to history. It can show you what people thought back in history. You can talk to, live a play by Oedipus Rex, that was written 2,500 years ago, and begin to understand the way people thought and acted during that time period. It can also be, I would say, it transports you. It connects all of us. It shows how each of us can have different attitudes, different ideas about how the world works. It can be an illuminating experience. Obviously, it's a form of communication. But theater can be it is a living, breathing thing, as opposed to other forms of art where you're looking at a piece of art on the wall and thinking, oh, this is the way it was done and why it was done. In theater, you get to participate as an audience and or a performer, and it is a give and take living experience when you watch the play, and I hope you've gotten a sense of that during the class period this semester. Again, I've included a couple of links here for Angels in America. I will also send you a review sheet for the exam, your last exam, and if you have any questions for any of those things, again, please feel free to send me an email or let me know what questions you may have. It's been a pleasure. I hope to see you someday again, and thank you for participating in the class.